my name is Tori, this is Novel Life, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to a really fun video that I did around this time last year. And I was like, well, I definitely have some books to add to that list. So I thought it'd be fun to sit down and talk about the books that I would sell my soul to read again for the first time. I have acquired some new favorites in the year of 2024, and definitely some of those took me by surprise. So I wanted to sit down and talk about these books with you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the books that I would sell my soul to read again for the first time. So the first one is technically a recent favorite. It was my first book of 2025, but I think the way that this book made me feel the first time I read it, which I did vlog for you guys, and I feel like I didn't actually get my thoughts across as well as I wanted to, and that is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. So this book is an epic fantasy, but it encompasses like character development, a family saga story that spans years and years and years. It has amazing character development. Like I said, it just has this like well thought out, well-written plot, and I just fell in love with the writing. I don't know if this author has any more books written after this one, but I am a fan of Emma Wang's books. So in this book, like I said, it's an epic fantasy. There's not really a romance in it. I wouldn't consider it a romance, but we follow Mizaki, and it is about her life. It's about her being a mother. It's about her being in this society that is a little bit, I wouldn't say a little bit, it's pretty biased towards women, and it's just interesting how she, you know, is not supposed to wield a blade, and she is put into this position and married off to this family where she has to leave that part of her life behind her, where she is trained, and she is a well-rounded warrior, and now she's just supposed to be a mother. She's supposed to raise kids. She's supposed to be a good wife, and you see that even though throughout these years that she has done that, it doesn't take away the danger. I'm trying to phrase this without spoiling anything, but I really, really, really loved this book. It's one that I think about often. Like, if something comes up, I'm like, wow, this reminds me of Misaki or her son, which we do follow in this book as well. So yes, it is a chunky book, but this was one of those books where I was reading it and I was just so immersed in the fantasy. Like, the fantasy world was so easy for me to dive into. Like, I was reading this book and watching it play out as a movie in my head, which doesn't always happen with books, but it happened with this one, and I loved my reading time. It took me 4 days to read it, and even though that is a long time for me to read a 700-page book, every second that I spent reading was so immerseful and so just like diving into a world that I would love to stay in and read about these characters. So this is one that I would definitely want to reread, but more so just because I love the writing and I love the character building, and you know, I feel like any woman who read this book or will read this book will see a part of themselves in this book, and that's pretty much the main reason why I love this book. The next books I want to mention are the Boys of Tomen series. So this is a series I'm pretty sure I talked about in the last time I did this video, but it is still very valid for me that I would legit sell my soul to read these books again. Now, I did reread Binding and Keeping 13 at the end of 2024, and I loved my reread. I absolutely adore these books so much. I love Johnny and Shannon. I love their story. I have such a connection to these characters because I see myself in Shannon a little bit, from this quiet, timid girl who was raised as like basically the only daughter in their family, and having this anxiety of going to school and just scared and not knowing what's going on. And I relate to it, and I see myself as like the girl that I used to be, and I see how far I've come. So it's like so interesting to see Shannon and her journey through this book. It just has a special place in my heart. So these two, Johnny and Shannon, are absolutely perfection to me. I love them so freaking much, and to be able to experience these two books again for the first time, I would die. I would legit die. And the other two books in the series are Saving and Redeeming 6. Now, I am a fan of these two books in a way that I am not yet. I read these, when did I read these? Like, 2 years ago, and now I think it's about 2 years ago that I read these books, okay? And I think I've only reread them once. Maybe, that's a big maybe, I don't even remember. But I haven't brought myself to reread them more recently because Joey's story in these two books hit so close to home for me. And being the oldest child and having to deal with the responsibilities and everything that's like put on your shoulders while you're trying to shoulder everyone else's troubles, all while you have your own. And it just is, I can't hear any critiques about this book. I don't know what it was about these books. I don't know if it's a combination of Chloe Walsh's writing, the story, Joey's story, Aoife being there for him, you know, everything that he's gone through. It's probably a combination of all those things, but let me tell you, I am not, and I don't think I will ever be over Joey and Aoife in my entire life. These two books will stay with me for literally the rest of my life, and I'm gonna tear up talking about these books. I don't know what's going on. I just love Joey so much, and yeah, these books have a special place in my heart. So if you do not like these books, totally fine. That's totally fine. I am just not at a place in my life where I can hear critiques about this book, okay? Like, I can't hear anything about Joey and Aoife, anything bad. I just can't. I'm just such a fan of these books that, like, your opinion, totally valid. You can think and however you want. I just can't hear any negative things about this book in particular. Like, Joey's story is so just perfect to me. The next book I have is actually a historical fiction book, and that is The Women by Kristen Hanna. So this was technically my first Kristen Hanna book, and I read it in February last year when it came out. I listened to the audiobook, and there's just some things about certain historical fiction books, why they stick with me, right? And I think for this one, it shows how specifically the woman we're following in this book and her journey in the military, what she's done, how she goes to Vietnam, how she serves her time there, and she is a nurse, and she has helped thousands of soldiers and people, you know, that are injured during the Vietnam War. And when she comes home, she's not given the care that she deserves. And I say care as in she's struggling mentally with going back into, I would say, normal civilian society, which a lot of people who go through the military they struggle going back into civilian life, like going back to what is their quote unquote life. And she doesn't get any care, and she is like, I'm struggling mentally, I'm not in a good place, I'm scared, can you please help me? And they literally look at her and say, it's because you're a woman, no women served in the Vietnam War, we don't know what you're talking about. And it is just something that sticks with me, because even though this happened, you know, all this time ago, women still get told that. They still get told, oh, you are crazy for thinking you have this, or you're crazy for feeling like this, by certain doctors and certain professionals. And it's like, no, we understand what we're feeling. There's something going on, and I'm asking for help, and I'm not being given that help. And it's just like so real and raw that it's still happening now with certain aspects. And it really hit home for me. Obviously the whole military perspective too of the Vietnam War, and the American people being told like, oh yeah, we're winning this war, when they were most definitely not. And it was a horrible war, and so many people lost their lives. And yeah, I love this historical fiction book for a multitude of reasons, but it's mostly just relating to this book as a woman. Even though this is 50 plus years in the future, I still relate to what she's going through, and I really love this book. So good. I have one more historical fiction book, and that is The Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. So this was our Leave It to the Pros book club pick for December. We wanted something like Christmassy, wintry, something like that. And I think both me and Christy were both taken surprise of how this book impacted us, and like how emotional we got to these characters. So this is an epistolary book. So the whole book is told by letters. And you see our main female character, she is writing to her brother who goes off to World War I, and her brother's best friend who has, been around her growing up. They also go off to World War I together. And you see how she's communicating with both of them about what's going on in the war. Like, they went off to war thinking they'd be back home within 6 weeks and they can go spend Christmas in Paris like they always do. And that war happens for 4+ years after that. And it is their journey of the tension that our female character that we're following feels, of being at home and feeling like she can't help. And, all while her best friends, all while her brother and her brother's best friend is off in this war that is just, like taking its toll on them. Like, they're seeing horrific things. And, you see that she's also communicating with her best friend that also is staying in London, and they're like trying to figure out what they can do. And it is just, with the way it was written, it was like, obviously, there were holes that we didn't see all of, like we didn't see everything, but the way that you pour your heart out into a letter, and the way that these characters have poured their heart out in these letters, you just really connect to that. I feel like if you're telling a story, right, through a letter. Sometimes, most of the times, like, it's always like these people will pour their souls into a letter, a handwritten letter, and send it off because it's easy to get your thoughts down that way. And I think the way that they chose to write this book really impacted like how people see it and how people feel about this book, and I loved it. There is a little bit of a romance in here, and I will tell you, I had to wait till the very last page because I was hanging on for dear life. I was like, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna sob around this book, and I did tear up at the end. And it's just one that I wish I could experience the roller coaster of emotions again, even though it was very exhausting, but it was so just rewarding at the end of the book to get to their, what they consider their happily ever after. And it was just amazing to read. Like, I absolutely loved it. The next book I have is a fantasy romance, and that is Meadow Slinger. So I talk about this book by Rachel Snyder quite a bit. I read it towards the end of 2024, and I really loved this book. So I don't know when the second book is coming out, but this ends on a major cliffhanger. And there were just so many twists and turns while I was reading the book, and so much action and so many things happening. Not like action as in like there's a fighting scenes or anything like that. There's just so many things happening with the characters of where they're going on this adventure. Like, they're going from this place to the other, they run into these people and those people, and it's just like a whole thing. And I just loved the ride of it. I don't know what it was. I just dove into this book and I read it within 2 days, and I was just counting down the seconds to where I could finish work so I could sit down and read this book. I don't know why I was like that, but I was just so invested in these characters and the way it was written. Like, I can understand that it's not a perfect book for a lot of people, and that's totally fine. But for me, I just had the most amazing time reading it, and I just loved it. I had the best time. And it was a while since I read a book like this where I was so like wholly invested in the plot and the characters, where they were going, just everything about this book. So this is a fantasy romance I absolutely loved. The next book I have is The Deepest End of Love by Lucina Connie. So this is a contemporary romance, and it is a third book in a series. You don't have to read all the books in order, but I would suggest it only because all of these characters are in like the same family. So the first book is actually the parents of our female character in this book, and the second one is her aunt, which is her father's sister. So it's just all interconnected. But this is a book that I think that if you have struggled trying to figure out whatever you want to do in your life, like where you're going, what you're doing, your career, your love life, your just everything, right? Like, you don't know what you're doing in life. I think a lot of people would relate to this. And I don't know what it was when I read this book, but I related to our female character so much because she comes from this place of privilege. She has the best parents and they've given her the best life, and yet she still feels conflicted. She's like, I've been given all of these things and I still feel conflicted of what I want to do with my life. And then our hero comes in and shows her, and, you know, just shows her that, like, not everything is black and white and it can be gray. I don't know what it was. I really connected with the writing. I really connected with our characters. I love their romance. It's forbidden. She is what's the word? She's at an internship, and he is like the internship supervisor. So it's a little bit forbidden in that way, but I love this one. I love Lucina Connie. She's a new to me author that I discovered in 2024, and I would just love to reread this for the first time and just be with her thoughts and the ride that she goes on, because I love it so much. The next book I have is A Photo Finish by Elsie Silver. So I actually reread this book in 2024 via audio, and I love the audiobook. The narrators are absolutely fantastic, okay? But this is one where this is part of her Gold Rush Ranch series, which I feel like is like an underrated series because everyone loved Chestnut Springs, and then now her Rose Hill series, which those are amazing series as well. But there was a part in this book where she really dives into something. I really can't say because it is a massive spoiler, but I loved this book. When I tell you I love this book, I wholly mean that in like the best way. I did not see it coming, but it is a perfect depiction of a person dealing with a thing. I'm really trying hard not to spoil things, but it is the perfect depiction of someone trying to just move on with their life and go forward, but always feeling like something's holding them back. I'm being very vague, and I'm being very vague on purpose because it's such a big part of the book that I loved it so much. And every time I read it, I'm like, God, I wish I can experience the first time when I figure it out, because I had to go back and reread it. And you're thinking, you're talking about like a small town romance. Are you serious? Yes, I'm absolutely serious. This book was so good. The romance was so good. The banter is so good. This is one of literally my favorites in this series. It is like a top book by her for me. So highly suggest everyone go pick this one up. And the last book I have is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. So me and this book, we go way back, okay? When this book came out at the beginning of 2024 without an audiobook, I tried to pick it up, and her writing in the first 20% is very dense. And it was so dense that I was like, am I dumb? I feel like I'm not getting the whole point of this book. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm not getting this point of this book. And so I put it down and I revisited this when the audiobook came out later in 2024, and it became one of my favorite books that I read. And I feel like I don't have the same appreciation because I've only read it once, if that makes sense. I definitely want to reread this and highlight. I even have this special edition. That's why I'm holding it up, because I love this book so much. But it was such an interesting fantasy romance that you are just fully thrown into this world and you are forced to figure things out. And I just absolutely loved it. I think it's beautifully written. I think it's written in a way that most fantasy romances aren't written. And so it can be confusing to some people, and it takes you off guard of how the writing is, and it takes a little while to get used to, but it's just because it's so unique and so different. And I have read another book by Sarah A. Parker, first in her other series, and her writing is very similar in that one, but it's a lot shorter. And it's just, you're thrown into the chaos of the world and the story, and you're just on the ride with these characters trying to figure things out. And I think that's just her writing, and I absolutely love it. It's not going to be for everyone, but for me, I loved it. And yeah, I thought it was perfection, and I want to reread it ASAP. So those are just some books that I would literally sell my soul to read again. They're just some all-time favorite books I would recommend to everyone. Yeah, just books that if I could reread again for the first time and record my reaction for you, because a lot of them I don't record my original reaction. I remember having a visceral reaction to some of these books and some parts of these books. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you've made it this far and you want to let me know, leave me a blue heart emoji in the comments down below. I am so just unoriginal with emojis, but I'm looking at When the Moon Hatched and it's a blue book. So leave me a blue heart emoji in the comments down below if you've made it this far. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content for me. As always, I hope you're living a novel life, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.